UFC 291, Salt Lake City, Utah, Justin versus Dustin 2. I can't wait for it. Two of my favorite fighters in the world, Dustin being my actual favorite fighter. This is going to be the most violent card of 2023, the most fan-friendly card of 2023. So I want to go into it, give you guys my thoughts, predictions, analysis, whatever. The timestamps will be down below because I know you guys don't want to watch this long form, 20-minute long video. I don't know how long it's going to end up being. So if you want to skip, it's going to be right here. Thank you for watching. Let's get into it. Obviously, got to start off with the main event, Justin versus Dustin 2. Can't wait for it. Super excited. There's so many storylines going into this. Haven't even mentioned the BMF belt. Obviously, going to get into that, give my thoughts on that. Just from a stylistic standpoint, obviously, it seems like we're going to get another brawl. These are two guys that absolutely thrive in the heat of battle. A lot of people clench up, they get nervous, they look for the easy way out. These guys are running towards the fire in situations like these. I don't think it'd be exaggeration to say that this could be one of the greatest fights ever in the history of combat sports. These are two guys that just bring it every time. They provide violence every time, and they're really hard to knock out. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a fight of the century type of fight. If you love Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald, this has potential to be even better, and that's not crazy to say. It's super interesting because both these guys are literally at the same spot in their career. They're both making one last run at the title. Justin has said that publicly. Dustin, we'd assume that's the case. It sucks that one of these guys has to lose this fight, but at the very least, one of them will inevitably be next in line for a title shot. The super underrated storyline here has to be the fight being in Utah because it is at altitude. Justin trains at altitude and Dustin does not, and I feel like there will definitely be an advantage for Justin in that aspect of it. But in a recent interview, Dustin said he'll be trying his best to prepare for it, and at the very least it seems like he's very well aware of it, which is important because a lot of these guys in Utah last year in August, they looked really gassed after a round or two, especially Leon Edwards versus Kamaru. But Kamaru didn't look gassed because, as you know, him and Justin are teammates and they train in Colorado, so that is higher altitude than it would be in Utah. So obviously the advantage there goes for Justin, and it's something that you really have to prepare for if you're in Dustin's position. The fact that this is for the BMF belt, yeah, obviously a lot of people don't like it, and I don't blame them, but honestly I think it's cool. I don't look at it as BMF, I look at it as most violent motherfucker instead. It'd be tough to argue against the winner not deserving that title of most violent MFer in the UFC. So therefore, you know, the BMF belt doesn't really bother me because I choose to look at it in that light. You know how the UFC is though? They're gonna want to put something on the line if you're headlining a pay-per-view, but I really didn't feel like it was necessary. At the same time, however, I really don't have a problem with it. Let me know what you guys think about that, by the way. Should that belt be on the line? I think it's kind of fun. I think it could be something that could be defended. I mean, in theory, it should be defended, but why not? It's cool to put things like this on the line. It just brings some different level of excitement. In the UFC, everything's so black and white. You're either fighting for the title or you're a pretender, and I don't really like that. This could open up a new division for guys who maybe are never gonna be at that top spot and just always like to fight and put on these big shows and are the most violent dudes in the company. I mean, why not? It's fun. It's something that could take on a life of its own as the years go on. If I had to predict who would win, I guess, well, Dustin's my favorite fighter, so I guess I would pick him, but it's as close to pick him as you could possibly get. Again, the altitude will play into this in a big way. I feel like if Dustin's not prepared for it, Justin will win this fight. And against Rafael, Justin looked amazing to me. Maybe his best performance ever besides that Tony fight. Honestly, you're stupid if you ever bet against Dustin in these types of fights. He thrives the most. It's pretty obvious. He's beat Michael Chandler, Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje already. He thrives in these situations, and he seems to always be the one coming out on top against guys like this of these styles. Who do you guys think will win that? Let me know. Next up, Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. Another awesome fight. I think the UFC did right by Alex. They could have given him Magomed Ankalaev. Also seems like whoever wins this fight will get a title shot, which is pretty cool because I really want to see Alex versus Jamal Hill. But obviously you have to get through a tough test in Jan Blachowicz. He hasn't looked the same as he did before Glover. So I think that the UFC really tried to give Alex the best possible matchup they could have that still justifies a title shot off of a win. Jan recently did an interview that said that the UFC promised the winner a title shot, so that sounds cool to me. Hopefully it's Alex. It's gonna be really hard because this is the first time we're ever gonna see his grappling really tested to this degree. His head coach is Glover Teixeira, and he beat Jan. I mean, obviously there has to be some sort of advantage to having the guy that's already beat him be your head coach, and I really think that it's gonna pay dividends, and I really think that Alex will surprise people in the grappling area. I think defensive grappling seems to be a little bit easier to pick up on. As far as offensive grappling, obviously we're not gonna see any of that. You just hope that you see the fight standing. If you're an Alex Pereira fan, I really hope we see this fight standing. Jan is also a very good defensive striker. If you go back to his fight against Izzy, he really didn't have many openings in the stand-up. I thought he fought a perfect fight standing up and grappling, so it will not be as easy as some people think in the stand-up area, but it's Alex Pereira. He has the left hook from hell, so it's going to be hard to bet against him if he's able to keep it standing. Underrated aspect here is that it is 3 rounds. I would say that favors Jan more because there's obviously less rounds and less opportunities for him to get tired into the later rounds. I think Alex beat Izzy in the 5th round. If that was a 3-round fight, Izzy wins. So it will help Jan that it is a 3-round fight. It will be interesting to see how this all plays out. If I had to pick, I'll pick Jan because, again, just because of the grappling, and we haven't seen Alex tested, but like I said, I do think he'll perform better than expected. I just think Jan will do enough just to eke out a decision. Third fight on the main card is Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green, a potential Tony Ferguson retirement fight, which is just crazy to think about. I think it is time to hang him up, especially if he loses. If he wins, I don't mind seeing him fight more guys like Bobby Green. We could go the Jim Miller route, the Jared Gordons of the world. There's guys at 155 that are just outside the top 15 that could make sense for a guy like Tony this late in his career if he's interested in still continuing. If he loses, there's no way you can justify him staying out there right now. He's coming off some pretty brutal losses. He does not look like himself anymore. He looks like he's aged 40 years in the past 5, and that just sucks because this is a vet who put on so many awesome performances, and you always felt he was shortchanged, never got the shot he deserved at Khabib, and then had to take a short notice fight with Justin, and everything was just a mess, and nothing really worked out for him in the end. And he still pushed through and won 12 fights in a row, and he should be remembered as that. He shouldn't be remembered as someone who just couldn't get it going towards the end of his career. Moving on from that, Bobby Green is a great fight for him. It's the UFC just doing the fans a favor, knowing that this is going to be a fight between 2 guys that just love to go at it. On the flip side, Bobby Green is also very fun to watch, and I do think Bobby Green will take it. He has seemed to just look a little bit better in his last 5 fights compared to Tony, and I don't think that's crazy to say. And this is a chance for him to gain more popularity if indeed he does win. I mean, a win against Tony Ferguson is probably his highest profile win, if I'm not mistaken. And that's great for him going into this end of his career as well. Regardless, this should be a very fun fight between 2 very tough vets who also happen to be some pretty great showmen as well. Next on the main card is definitely the most interesting matchup of the 5. Paulo Costa versus Ikram Aliskerov. Look, the writing's on the wall. Paulo Costa is on his last fight of his UFC deal, and it seems like the UFC doesn't want to do him any favors on the way out. If he were to lose to Aliskerov, he would go down as losing against an unranked guy. And we all know how that looks going into free agency. However, that's not fair, because if he does lose, he's losing to a very, very tough fighter with a lot of potential in this 185-pound division. Aliskerov may be unranked, but he is no scrub. For those of you that don't know, him and Khamzat have fought in the past, and Khamzat has said that besides Gilbert Burns, Aliskerov was his toughest fight. This guy's a matchup nightmare out of Dagestan, Russia, and you know what they say about them Dagestan boys, man. I think it's surprising because Ikram has only fought one time in the UFC, but the 185-pound division needs new contenders. It needs fresh blood. It needs guys that really can bring a fight to Izzy. And so far, the guys that are just at the top of 185, Izzy's ran through them all. So I don't blame the UFC for just really wanting new contenders there and really making that push to try and get as many new contenders as they possibly can. Paulo is no slouch, so it will be fun to see these guys go at it. I really don't think it will be an easy test for Ikram. Ikram's not just going to walk through him, and if he does, be aware because the hype train will be real. Everybody's going to be talking about him if he's able to make quick work of Paulo, but I don't expect that at all. This guy's been in the Octagon with Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya, and no one's made him look like easy work outside of the champ. If Costa does end up winning, A, he's getting more money from the UFC, undoubtedly. He's gonna get a fat check, and B, I really think it sets up for the rematch with Izzy. I just do. I don't know why. I mean, I guess he would maybe have to fight one more, but he would be knocking on the door of fighting Izzy again, and that could be fun. I mean, why not? Paulo hasn't looked great, but it would be nice to see him put on a good show and maybe start making some noise again. But I think I'm going to pick Ikram here. I think the momentum's on his side. They're really pushing him. And, you know, again, being in Utah, Paulo did not look good in altitude against Luke Rockhold. And I'm not sure if that'll hold. Hopefully he learned the lesson of having to be out in Utah a little bit earlier. But we'll have to wait and see. I think I would take Ikram. Opening the card is a fight that could easily main event a fight night. Michel Pereira versus Wonderboy Thompson. For me personally, it's really hard to bet against Wonderboy here, and I think the simple reason is because unless you have a superior grappling advantage over Wonderboy, I just don't see how you can bet against him. He always seems to find a way against other strikers. He always seems to impose his will in the striking department in one way or another. Unless you can severely out-grapple Wonderboy, I don't think you can beat him. And I don't see Michel Pereira being able to really out-grapple Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So for me, I'm going to have to pick Wonderboy here, but it is going to be another fan-friendly fight, man. This is easily the most violent UFC card of 2023 so far, and I love it. I love how the UFC just made this purely fan-friendly. They didn't put any heavy grapplers in here. Not that I have anything against that at all, but obviously we all love the knockouts. We all love the guys that love to stand and bang. So I think we're gonna get that throughout this whole card, and there is no better fight to open the card than these two. It's been in the works for a while now, and I'm glad that we're finally gonna be able to see it. Another fight that was confirmed on this card is the return of Derrick Lewis. He's gonna be fighting Rodrigo de Lima, a guy I personally don't know anything about. I won't lie to you guys. I looked up his record, tried to see if they had any common opponents. They really don't. From what I do see, De Lima is not this crazy knockout artist, so it really does seem like the UFC is trying to gift D-Lew a fight here, a fight that he can definitely win. The fear here, if you're a Derrick Lewis fan though, is Derrick Lewis at altitude. How does that look? Does he arrive to Utah early to try and prepare himself for it? How in shape is he going to be for it? Because the last thing you want is to see D-Lew go to a decision. His more than likely path to victory is obviously the knockout. And if he's exhausted from fighting at altitude, the odds of him getting that knockout obviously are much more slim. However, I feel like if he does prepare for the altitude and if he does come in shape, this is a very winnable fight for D-Lew, and I would love to see him get back on the winning track. Lastly, one of my favorite fighters on the roster, confirmed to be fighting against Michael Chiesa. Can't wait to see this because I really love Kevin Holland. I also think he's looked really good at 170. He looks a lot stronger for the weight class than he did compared to 185. At 185, he just looked a little too thin, a little bit too outmatched by guys like Derrick Brunson and Marvin Vettori. I feel like the UFC is very good to Holland. He's a fan favorite. He doesn't complain about fighter pay. As a matter of fact, he does the complete opposite. He fights often. He has saved them on a lot of occasions, first with Vettori and then with Chimaev as well. This is a guy that always brings it, never complains, and fights very often. Everything that a guy like Dana White loves. So it is very interesting to see how they give him a very gradual progression with each fight at 170. They don't try and shoot him too much to the top because they're giving him a real opportunity to organically grow, which I think is great because, again, I do love Kevin Holland. With Chiesa, this is, I think, Chiesa's most important fight of his career. If he loses, he's in serious danger here. That would be 3 in a row. He's coming off a 1.5-year layoff after a loss to Sean Brady. I think Chiesa has to look good and at the very least has to be very competitive. You don't want to get knocked out by Kevin Holland early in the fight and lose that way, because it will not look good on your record, with the bosses, and with the fans. I'm very, very curious to see what the grappling exchanges look like here. Kevin Holland's takedown defense has really improved over the past few years, but Chiesa comes from a very wrestling heavy background, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to really grind out Kevin Holland for 3 rounds. But I do give the power advantage to Kevin Holland, and I do think that there is a very, very realistic path to victory via knockout for Kevin Holland, and I honestly, that's who I'm going to pick. I mean, maybe there's bias because he's one of my favorite guys to watch, but I do also realistically think that there's a very real path to victory there for him. That's all we got for UFC 291 for now. This is by far the most violent card of 2023, and I can't wait. I wish it wasn't in Utah because that altitude seems to really mess with a lot of guys. Hopefully they see what happened at last year's event in Utah and learn from it and are able to adjust accordingly. If you're a nerd for this UFC stuff like me, we're counting down the days because this is definitely the most fan-friendly card that has been made in a long time. I feel like pure violence all over it. Can't wait to watch it, and yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts, predictions, what you guys think I got wrong. Whatever you guys want to talk about, let me know. Put it down in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that stupid stuff. All right, bye.